me clear my
What's up, my wizards? Dev, SBMTG, place down there, decks and things. Today we have yet another double deck tech. I'm doing a lot of these lately. This one is Omnath Ramp. I'm doing a double deck tech again for the same reason I did one last time, that I think the budget version and the competitive version are different. They're similar in some ways, but they're different enough that I didn't just want to give you one version of the deck and leave it at that. We're going to do the budget deck first. That's what we usually do. This deck will only cost you like $15 on TCG Player. That's the median prices too. For pretty cheap, you get to play a lot of powerful cards and a lot of really cool synergies. So, let's check it out, starting with the creatures. We're playing 15 creatures in the deck, and I'm going to start with a choice. That's something I very, very rarely do, but I think there's arguments for both cards. I know which one I ultimately pick here, but I at least want to make the argument for a weird card. What I went with is 4 copies of Leaf Gilder in the deck to start it off. Sure, it's not a land, doesn't have all the synergy with Omnath, but it's the only thing we can really play that puts us a turn up that early in the game. And in the budget deck, it's really one of the only 2-drops we can play, and if we play it, then we can go on the next turn, drop a land, and then play an Explosive Vegetation, which can be very, very important and allow for like turn 5's Omnaths and stuff. So that's, Leaf Gilder's a very important card, Ramp is important, and this is the only thing for 2 mana we can comfortably play in this budget deck. Now, I think another cool card we can play, and something I've experimented with too, it's been really fun, is Crater Elemental. Hear me out, I've got arguments for this. You can block, consider that dude blocked, tap, sacrifice, kill a different guy that's swinging in. That's actually really good. Not only that, but it's resistant to a lot of removal that Leaf Gilder isn't resistant to. They can just kill Leaf Gilder with like any red removal, any black removal, but Crater Elemental is a little bit different. It can't be killed by any red spot removal. As far as black removal goes, it can be killed by ultimate price, but the use of price has gone down since Grasp of Darkness came out, and Grasp of Darkness doesn't kill Crater Elemental. So I could definitely see an argument for this, and obviously Elemental has good synergy with Omnath. You got an Omnath on the board, sack your Crater Elemental to kill a guy, and you're able to Lightning Bolt on top of the 4 damage you're already doing to a creature. So that seems good too, right? Both cards have worked very well, but like I've said, I've ultimately gone with Leaf Gilder. I felt like it was the better choice, and it's one of the only 2-drops we can play. We sorely need a 2-drop, so I went with it instead. But Crater Elemental is good. 3 Grove Rumbler in the deck. Once we start dropping a bunch of lands, Grove Rumbler can get absolutely enormous, Grove Rumbler can still be really good and often the biggest threat on the board if you're just getting 2 landfall triggers off of it. So yeah, turns out it's still a great attacker. We're playing 3 copies of Mina and Den in the deck. This is the awesome 4-drop that I was talking about a second ago. We definitely need to play this. The synergy with Omnath is absolutely ridiculous. We play 2 lands a turn, we get 2 5/5s a turn theoretically, and having this out on the board before we play our Omnath will help us get to our Omnath. So just really good synergy, and if we have a Grove Rumbler out, that's just so hard to say for me. If we have a Grove Rumbler out, then this has synergy with that too. Giving the tokens from Omnath, Trample, all of that is very, very good too. Really good icing there. So yes, Mina and Den is the just most important card we can play other than Omnath. And I've squeezed in 2 copies of Embodiment of Fury in the deck. I want to see how it works, and it works really, really well. It's good that we have, a 4 Power God for 4 mana, another one of those. That'll help out with an enchantment that we're playing in this deck a little bit later on. I'll tell you about that. And we're playing a different enchantment that functions very similarly in the competitive deck. So something like this is really good, just as many big guys as we can get for as low cost. That's always good. Plus, if we do have an Omnath out, good synergy there, by the way, play a land, you get a 5/5, and we get a 3-power land creature, So that's 8 power just for playing a land. You have both guys out, and gives the land creatures trample, just another thing that gives our dudes trample. So just everything about it, yeah, I'll totally at least attempt to play it, and it's been good enough to keep the 2 of. 1 copy of Whisperwood Elemental in the deck, and you could play even more. I've got another in the sideboard of the budget deck here. Definitely an amazing card. The longer it stays out, the more advantage it gives us. That's awesome. And it's protection against sweepers, which we do totally care about, especially once we start making tokens. So hopefully we can close the game out once we start making tokens pretty quickly. But Whisperwood Elemental is not only an elemental, giving it good synergy right away, but is also good protection against sweepers, which can be an issue for us at times, so definitely worth playing. And the big man himself to finish off the creatures. 2 copies of Omnath. The big show is the big show. This guy is the whole reason then we play the entire deck, you know? Just, I've already talked like about Omnath with literally every creature I've already talked about, you know? So, Omnath, ladies and gentlemen, we're playing 18 spells in the deck. That's kind of a lot, but we gotta play them all because we gotta play ramp and burn and do some other stuff. So, we're playing 18 spells overall. First, let's start with our ramp suit here. We're gonna play 4 copies of Nissa's Pilgrimage, 3 copies of Natural Connection. I'll talk about that in a second. Then the obligatory 4 copies of Explosive Vegetation. Absolutely need that. Don't have to talk about vegetation too much. 2 landfall triggers is freaking amazing. That ends up being 2 5/5s if Omnath's out, or helps us get to the Omnath. So yeah, play that. Same thing with Nissa's Pilgrimage, sort of a no-brainer here. Probably the best 3-mana thing that we could play. Now, the option is between Natural Connection and Map the Ways. We're not playing Hangerback Walker in this deck. We're not playing it in the main deck of the competitive one either. Honestly, I think there's more fun stuff to do. You'll see. You'll see. But with Natural Connection, I think it's a much better card in this deck because we can do stuff at instant speed. You know, we can get a 5/5 out of Omnath at instant speed. We can get, you know, Grove Rumbler bigger at instant speed. Embodiment of Fury, he can make a 3/3 land out of one of our lands at instant speed, creating a blocker, you know. Just all kinds of cool surprise things that come into play. Awesome plays when we play Natural Connection. It's been really, really awesome. Either as just ramp that we play as our 3rd turn play, or something that once we have a couple of pieces out, we can play more strategically. It's pretty versatile in that way. Let me know how you feel about that pick. I feel like it gives us a combat trick, and that's important. And here's our burn suit here. We've got 4 copies of Fiery Impulse and 2 copies of Roast. Pretty much rounds it all out here. Fiery Impulse is a great turn 1 or 2 play, usually turn 1. That's going to take out anything small that they play on the first couple of turns. It really helps against aggro, which is a deck that we are weak against while we try to build, you know, our board position. So really important that we have Impulse. And same thing with Roast, you know, takes out both small and larger creatures in the early game. So just need the burn so we can cover ourselves while we ramp up and get to our bigger stuff. And 1 copy of Nissa's Renewal in the deck. I could have put it in the ramp suite, but I didn't. I wanted to talk about it all by itself here. A lot of the decks that, you know, are legitimate green-red Ulamog ramp decks in the format will play at least the 1 copy of Renewal, and it's obvious why, you know. With Omnath, though, it's sort of even better, getting us 3 5/5s and a bunch of life, 7 life. 15 power plus 7 life. If you were behind before, then you are not anymore, almost guaranteed. And 2 enchantments in the deck. We're playing a couple of copies of Elemental Bond here. I feel like it's cool to squeeze this in because, again, we've got so many things that have power, you know, 3 or greater. Basically everything we're playing, other than Leaf Gilder or Crater Elemental, whichever one you decide to go with. But every other thing will draw us a card off of this, not to mention the tokens that we get off of Omnath. And sure, it feels like win more once you have your Omnath out, but getting to draw a card every time you play a land and get a 5/5 guy is just all the value in the entire world. So yeah, Elemental Bond is ridiculous. Play it. 25 lands in the budget version and the competitive version. But in this deck, we don't get to play fetch lands other than Evolving Wilds, which is kind of a hindrance. Obviously, if we have landfall things like Omnath and Grove Rumbler, it's always good to have fetch lands. That's if we're able to get 2 landfall triggers in 1 turn. We still do it with Evolving Wilds, and we can do it with Blighted Woodland, which we're playing a full 4 of in the deck. Because if we're able to activate it with an Omnath on the board, that's 10 power right there. So yeah, Blighted Woodland's ridiculous. Other than that, we're just playing a bunch of basics and stuff. Because I don't want a bunch of things to come into play tapped, and I want us to be able to search up as many basics as possible, because we got a lot of things that do that in the deck. Here's the sideboard. Everything's pretty much cut and dry as far as I can tell, you know. I feel like everything is fairly self-explanatory. Green Warden against decks that play a lot of removal. Display of Dominance against, obviously, Planeswalkers. So, yeah, I think like, these are probably some of the better options that we have in a budget version, at least. Here are the power rankings for the budget version. A final score of 58, not too shabby for a $15 deck. Not at all, really, you know. And it's really, really fun to play. If you're one of those ramp fiends, this is the one for you, you know. I know a lot of players just really, really love the ramp philosophy. And once you've got your Omnath out, really silly things start happening. We just got to get there. Mina and Din is an amazing card to help us get there and capitalize once we do. So the deck has a lot of really good pieces. It's just got to get set up. That's all for the budget deck. When we get to the competitive deck, this one will cost you about $275 on TCG Player. This deck is a little bit different. It's got some similarities, plays some same cards, but we're actually adding an entire color here. This is going to be Teamer Omnath, because we open up to a couple of options I think are really, really good for us if we do that. So let's give it a shot. Let's start with the creatures, just like we always do. First of all, 1 copy of Dragon Master Outcast in the non-budget build. Outcast is super duper good, and I just like the 1 copy so we can randomly draw into it later on in the game. This is basically a 6 or 7 drop. anyway, you know. And in this deck, it actually comes down to like a 5 or 6 drop because we're getting lands really, really fast. But in any ramp deck, I would play at least one copy of this, in my opinion. Some of them put it in the sideboard, some don't play it at all, but I just love Outcast so much that I think he definitely is a natural fit for something like this. We're going to play a similar card to Dragon Master Outcast in the 2-drop slot. 4 copies of Sylvan Advocate for the same reason. It's a great early blocker, by the way. The Bant Company decks have made really good use of this already since the format started, so I tried it out and it's been awesome here too. Again, great early blocker, which is something that we want. Is resistant to some types of early game removal, mostly red, and just really gets big later on. 4 copies of Rattleclaw Mystic in the deck, another creature-based ramp thing and a thing that wants lands, I understand that. But, again, the best thing we can play on turn 2 to make sure that we can ramp into something on turn 3, like an Explosive Vegetation or a Mina and Den on turn 3 is also really good. So we need a turn 2 thing that ramps us by a turn. That's really important for both decks. So also, since we're playing Teamer colors, this gives us a free blue source. That's really, really, really important. We need that very badly. And we're playing like Woodland Wanderer. This helps us spread out more colors, get more colors when we play Woodland Wanderer, and play it a turn early too. So yeah, everything about Rattleclaw Mystic is definitely, I think it's a must play, to be honest. 2 copies of Nissa, Vastwood Seer in the deck, the most expensive non-land card in the entire deck, but I think very important to play. Not only will it give us a free landfall trigger with Omnath later on in the game, helps us get to Omnath, hey Ziggy, you're creepy, hey buddy, but helps us get to Omnath by smoothing out our lands, you know. But free landfall triggers are good, so yes. She creates an elemental, that's always good when you got Omnath lurking around, and she's card advantage, so you can help draw, you know, draw into your Omnaths more easily, and all your other stuff you want. So just Nissa is absolutely perfect for the deck. 3 copies of Woodland Wanderer in the deck. Just talking about this guy. You can make a really big Woodland Wanderer in this deck. It's up to 6/6 with the mana base we got going. So we've got some different, we're doing the weird things with fetch lands, you know, thing. So we can make up to 4 colors of mana pretty reliably. It's not that hard. And with Rattleclaw Mystic, we can play him as early as turn 3. Just everything's about the guy's good. We can reliably get a 5/5 Woodland Wanderer like super easily and often on turn 3. So just a ridiculous threat, and this deck plays a lot more just really solid threats than the first deck played, you know. And this is just a great one to have. I just really don't see any reason not to play him. 2 Mina and Den in the deck works the same way it did in the last deck, you know. Either gets us to Omnath or becomes absolutely ridiculous once we do have an Omnath out. So, Mina and Den, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 4 mana, 4/4. Has 2 awesome lines of text. This card's good. And 2 copies of my best friend Omnath right here. He's the locus of rage. He's so rageful. Yeah. Omnath, again, with the Omnath here. We play Lance, we get huge dudes, and we build the entire deck around that philosophy right there. So, Omnath. We get to play 1 Planeswalker in this deck. We're going to try out 1 copy of Chandra Flamecaller. Been pretty good. Good synergy with Omnath in that, sure, if you make those elemental tokens with her +1 ability and they go till the end of the turn, they exile. You don't get the lightning bolt in that case. The Omnath does not trigger if they exile. But if they die in combat for whatever reason, you do get the lightning bolt. So your opponent's in sort of a damned if you do or damned if you don't situation. I can either block these guys and not take the damage from them, combat damage, or I can block these guys and probably definitely kill them and then I'll take damage either way. So it just really is a headache for them if you got an Omnath out. Or you can sweep the board of like tokens and stuff and keep most of your dudes. So just, yeah, the 1 copy of Chandra is good when she turns up. We've got ways of like drawing cards in the deck, just like we did in the first deck. So yeah, 1 copy of Chandra's been darn good. We can make 6 mana. That's on the way to 7. So the 1 copy is definitely playable. I'm going to do the enchantments first because I really want to talk about this enchantment. There's 2 copies of Temur Ascendancy in the deck, which is definitely an upgraded elemental bond. This is one of the entire reasons that we want to expand into Temur colors for this deck at all, really. But it's just ridiculously good even before you get your Omnath because so many of our creatures will trigger it, you know, when they come into play. And even later on in the game, Sylvan Advocate, playing that will trigger it too. So nearly everything, trigger the guy, that's good. And Nissa makes a creature that'll trigger it too. So that's awesome right there. So many good synergies. And when you do have an Omnath out, then every land that you play gets you a 5/5 creature with haste that draws you a card. That's just all the value in the entire world. So Temur Ascendancy is godlike. Seriously, it's an amazing card. We're still keeping a basic ramp suit here. I am going to play 3 copies of Map the Wastes in this deck, so playing more creatures on the low end of the curve, and I feel like it just serves us a little bit better. Hangerback Walker is in the board, so Map the Wastes I think is better in this deck. We don't have as many combat tricks and such with it, so I'm going to work with Natural Connection. So I'll play Map the Waste in this version, 3 copies of Nyssa's Pilgrimage, and then 4 copies of Explosive Vegetation. So just sort of the obligatory ramp suit here. There's no reason not to go into it too much. You know, they're just all pretty much what we need to do the things we want to do. We're also going to play that 1 copy of Nyssa's Renewal. Just still ridiculous. Whether you have your Omnath or not, helps you get to the Omnath, or makes all the value if you do have an Omnath out. So Nyssa's Renewal. As far as the rest of the spells, we got 3 copies of 1 mana cost spells. We're going to play 2 copies of Fiery Impulse in the deck, again to help us out in the early game mostly. You know, it's really what we needed for us to clear up the board against aggro. And sure, there's just the 2 copies, but I'd rather play 2 than no removal at all. So at least that. And 1 copy of Stubborn Denial, a very, very important card for us to play as long as we're in Teamer colors. A lot of our creatures will fulfill that requirement to just counter the non-creature spell no matter what. And even if we don't have one of those guys out yet, it's probably early enough game to where they can't pay the 1 anyway. They've used the curve for their turn on said spell. So yeah, just absolutely amazing card. Counters mass removal in the late game. Once we've gotten set up, we don't want to lose that. So, and once we've gotten set up, we've fulfilled the requirement on it. And Omnath does that by himself. So does even like Mina and Den. So really easy to get that requirement. And countering non-creature spells is great against mass removal. So yeah, we'll play this all day. 25 lands in the deck, and we are doing fetch lands this time around. Very, very important that we do that. Sure, Omnath is really the only thing that triggers landfall in the deck, but just being able to, you know, get 2 5/5s, 10 power out of 1 fetch land later on in the game is amazing. It gives you a reason to hold fetch lands if you can, you know, which you can't always, but it makes fetch lands really good top decks later in the game too. So definitely play all the fetch lands that you can. Here's the sideboard for the competitive deck. It's not really too much different. You know, we're still playing things like Natural State, Rending Volley. Radiant Flames, though, is in this one. That's a very important card for the deck. I love that we can play that and get a lot of value out of it. Usually we will get the 3 out of it, so that's important. But we're still playing a lot of the same stuff, give or take. We get to play Dragon Lord of Tarka. That's in there too. If we want to put it in, we can. And here are the power rankings for the competitive version. A final score of Nintendo 64. Not bad, really, for a $275 or so deck. Just, you know, anywhere between 300 or less. That's not bad at all. Turns out, you know, and we get a bunch of fetch lands. Now, I would probably recommend building this version of the deck if you already have your fetch lands, but I wouldn't go out and spend $200 on fetch lands when they rotate in just like 2.5 months. Probably unwise. Unless you want to play Modern. You can always play Modern. They're really important in that format. So yeah, go ahead and get your fetch lands. They're going to be important in Eternal formats for like ever. So yeah, get fetch lands. Forget what I say. That's all I've got for right now. Let me know what you want me to do next. I'm working on a lot of stuff. I want to do tutelage, and I want to do Hedron alignment, along with all the myriad other things. But those are the things that I'm sort of focusing on right now. And here's my email address right here. Shoot questions for the Q&A that I want to do. Anything you want to ask, you know, about Magic or about me or about whatever, about the channel, ask those questions at my email address, and I'll do a Q&A video here coming up in probably the next 2 weeks or so. I want to gather questions for it. If you enjoyed the content, I think you know what to do by now. You're on YouTube. You spent some time here. This is the spot YouTubers reserve to tell you to hit the thumbs up and do all the things. Please share the video. Comment. I want to know how you felt. Subscribe if you're new. Yada, yada. Same old solid dance. In any case, you know the drill. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Plays with decks and such. Thanks for watching, my wizards.